The conference room felt suffocating as I sat there, watching my husband James parade around like he owned the place. Well, technically he thought he did. His expensive suit perfectly pressed, that signature smirk playing on his lips as he gathered our entire design team for what he called an important announcement. My name is Madison Chin, and at 35, I'd spent the last decade building inspired designs from the ground up. What started as a small interior design consultancy in my garage had grown into one of Seattle's most sought-after luxury design firms. And now I was about to watch my husband try to steal it all away. As of today, James announced, standing at the head of the table, there will be some significant changes to our company structure. He emphasized the word "our" like it was some kind of joke. I've decided to take Inspired Designs in a new direction with new leadership. I felt the eyes of our employees darting between us. They knew something was wrong. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Madison will be stepping down, James continued, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. And I'll be taking over as CEO, along with our new creative director, Miss Olivia Barrett. Right on cue, a tall blonde woman in her late 20s walked into the room, wearing a dress that cost more than most people's monthly salary. Olivia, the same woman I'd seen James meeting for business at expensive restaurants over the past few months. The same woman whose name kept appearing on late-night text messages he thought I didn't notice. Olivia brings fresh perspective and extensive connections in the luxury market, James said, placing his hand on her shoulder. She'll be instrumental in taking this company to the next level. I sat there, maintaining my composure as I watched my employees' faces shift from shock to confusion to discomfort. These people were my family. We'd built this company together, through late nights and impossible deadlines, through victories and setbacks. And now they were being handed over to someone who'd never stepped foot in our office until today. Madison. James turned to me, his voice patronizing. You can clear out your office by the end of the day. HR will handle your separation package. The room fell silent. Everyone waited for my reaction, probably expecting tears or anger. Instead, I smiled. Of course, I said, my voice steady. Whatever you think is best for the company. James faltered for a moment, clearly thrown off by my calm demeanor. He'd expected a fight, wanted one even. It would have made him look more justified in his takeover. But I wasn't going to give him that satisfaction. What James didn't know, what he'd been too arrogant to even consider, was that I'd seen this coming months ago. The late meetings, the secretive phone calls, the way he'd suddenly taken an interest in our company's financial structure after years of treating it as my little project. 6 months earlier, I'd noticed something odd in our business accounts. Small transfers to a new consulting firm, Barrett and Associates. It hadn't taken much digging to discover that Olivia Barrett wasn't just James's mistress. She was his planned ticket to taking over my company. They thought they were being clever, setting up a separate business entity that would gradually acquire controlling interest in Inspired Designs. What they hadn't counted on was me discovering their plan and quietly making my own moves. While James was busy whining and dining Olivia, I've been working with my lawyer, Sarah Martinez, to protect my interests. They're trying to pull a hostile takeover, Sarah had said, reviewing the paperwork. But they've made one crucial mistake. That mistake was assuming I would be too trusting, too naive to see what was happening. With Sarah's help, I used my personal savings to set up a shell company that acquired 80% ownership of Barrett and Associates through a series of complex transactions. James and Olivia had been so focused on their plan to take over Inspired Designs, they never bothered to check who was buying shares in their new venture. As I packed up my office that afternoon, I could hear James and Olivia in the conference room, already planning changes. They were probably congratulating themselves on how smoothly everything had gone. Are you really just going to let them do this? Lisa, my assistant of 5 years, asked as she helped me box up my awards and photographs. Trust me, I said, carefully wrapping a frame containing my first design award. This isn't over. Sometimes you have to let people think they've won before they realize just how much they've lost. That evening, as I drove home to my empty house, James had moved out weeks ago, claiming he needed space to think. I received a text from Sarah. Everything's in place. They'll find out tomorrow when they try to access the company accounts. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my balcony, watching the sun set over the Seattle skyline. Tomorrow, James and Olivia would discover that their brilliant plan had backfired spectacularly when they tried to access Barrett and Associates accounts to complete their takeover of Inspired Designs. They'd learned that they no longer had controlling interest in their own company. The real question was, how long would it take them to realize that the mysterious majority shareholder of Barrett and Associates was none other than the woman they just tried to push out of her own company? I smiled, taking a sip of wine. After 10 years of marriage, James still hadn't learned the most important thing about me. I didn't need anyone to succeed. I built my company from nothing, and I protect it the same way, with determination, intelligence, and the ability to see 10 steps ahead of anyone who tried to take it from me. My phone buzzed again. This time it was James. We need to talk about the transition tomorrow. Breakfast meeting at 8? I set my phone down without replying. Let him wait. Tomorrow would bring all the answers he needed, just not the ones he was expecting. The next morning would mark the beginning of James's downfall, and I was ready to watch every moment of it unfold. The next morning, I arrived at Inspired Designs exactly at 7:45 a.m., 15 minutes before the breakfast meeting James had requested. The office was quiet, with only a few early birds at their desks. I noticed Lisa was already there, pretending to work while shooting worried glances my way. I walked straight to the conference room and took my usual seat, pulling out my laptop and a stack of documents Sarah had prepared. At exactly 8 a.m., James strode in with Olivia close behind, both looking far too pleased with themselves. "Madison," James said, his tone condescending. "I'm glad you could make it. We need to discuss the handover of company passwords and access codes." I smiled, opening my laptop. "Of course. But first, shouldn't we wait for the Barrett and Associates documentation to clear? I believe you need those accounts activated to complete the transfer." James and Olivia exchanged a quick glance. "How did you know about that?" Olivia asked, her perfectly manicured hand tightening around her designer handbag. "Oh, I make it my business to know everything about my company," I replied, keeping my voice light, including any attempts to take it over through shell corporations. James's face darkened. "That's none of your concern anymore. The transfer is happening whether you like it or not. We have controlling interests through Barrett and Associates. Are you sure about that?" I asked, turning my laptop around to face them. On the screen was a detailed ownership breakdown of Barrett and Associates, showing that 80% of the shares belonged to Phoenix Ventures LLC, my shell company. The color drained from James's face as he stared at the screen. This has to be a mistake," he stammered, pulling out his phone and frantically scrolling through his emails. "No mistake," I said calmly. "I acquired majority ownership of Barrett and Associates 6 months ago, which means, effectively, I now control both companies." Olivia's perfectly composed facade cracked. "You can't do this," she shrieked, jumping to her feet. "We spent months planning everything. The accounts, the transfers. The affair?" I added, raising an eyebrow. "Yes, I know all about that too. Those business dinners at Canlis weren't exactly subtle, James." James slumped in his chair, his arrogance finally giving way to realization. "How did you? When did you? When did I figure it out?" I finished for him. "Maybe if you'd spent less time underestimating me and more time actually learning about business, you would have noticed the signs. But you were too busy believing I was just the naive wife who got lucky with a design company." I pulled out the stack of documents Sarah had prepared. "These papers outline the new company structure. You have 2 choices. Option 1. You both resign immediately, sign non-compete agreements, and walk away with nothing but the clothes on your backs. Option 2. I expose your attempted corporate theft to the board, press charges for fraud, and make sure neither of you works in this industry again." Olivia turned to James, her voice rising with panic. "Do something. You said this was foolproof." "Foolproof?" I laughed. James has never been good at details. Too focused on the big picture to notice the little things. Like the fact that I've been 3 steps ahead of you both since the beginning. Just then, Sarah walked into the conference room, right on schedule. "Good morning," she said, setting her briefcase on the table. "I see we're discussing the ownership transition." James's head snapped up. You're in on this?" Sarah smiled coldly. "I represent Madison's interests, and right now, those interests include making sure you understand exactly how much trouble you're in." The next hour was a blur of legal terms and paperwork. James and Olivia sat there, shell-shocked, as Sarah outlined exactly how their attempted takeover had backfired. Not only had they failed to gain control of Inspired Designs, but they'd also lost control of their own company in the process. "This is impossible," Olivia muttered, staring at the documents in front of her. "We had everything planned perfectly." "Perfectly?" I asked, standing up and gathering my things. "You planned to steal a company from someone who built it from nothing. Did you really think I wouldn't fight back?" As I walked toward the door, James finally found his voice. "Madison, wait. We can talk about this. Maybe come to some kind of arrangement." I turned back, meeting his eyes. "The time for arrangements was before you decided to betray everything we built together. You made your choice, James. Now you get to live with it." I stepped out of the conference room and found the entire office had gone quiet. Everyone was pretending to work while clearly trying to overhear what was happening. I cleared my throat and all eyes turned to me. "There will be a company-wide meeting in 30 minutes, I announced. "I'll be addressing some changes in leadership. Until then, please continue with your regular work." Lisa appeared at my side, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Is everything okay?" I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in months. "Everything's perfect. Sometimes people need to learn the hard way that appearances can be deceiving." As I stood at the front of our largest conference room 30 minutes later, looking out at the faces of employees who had become like family, I felt a surge of pride. These were the people who had helped build Inspired Designs, who had believed in my vision when it was nothing more than sketches and dreams. James and Olivia sat in the back, their earlier confidence replaced by barely concealed rage. Sarah stood beside me, a subtle reminder that everything was proceeding exactly as planned. "As some of you may have heard," I began, my voice clear and steady, "there have been some attempted changes to our company's structure. I want to be transparent about what's happened and where we're going from here." I took a deep breath, scanning the room. My husband James and Ms. Barrett attempted to orchestrate a hostile takeover of Inspired Designs through their company, Barrett and Associates. What they didn't realize was that I had already secured majority ownership of their company months ago. A murmur ran through the room. I saw several people trying to hide their smiles, while others shot disapproving glances at James and Olivia. Effective immediately, I will remain as CEO of Inspired Designs. James and Ms. Barrett will be leaving the company. Their security access has already been revoked, and they will be escorted out after this meeting. James stood up abruptly. "This isn't over, Madison. You can't just—" "Actually, it is over," Sarah interjected, her voice sharp. "Unless you'd like us to pursue criminal charges for attempted corporate fraud." He sank back into his chair, his face red with humiliation. Olivia stared straight ahead, her perfectly applied makeup unable to hide the shock and anger in her expression. "To our employees," I continued, "I want to assure you that your jobs are secure. In fact, I'm announcing a company-wide bonus structure to thank you for your loyalty during this challenging time." Lisa, sitting in the front row, was the first to break into applause. Others quickly joined in, and soon the room was filled with supportive cheers. The sound washed over me like a wave of validation. These people knew who had really built this company. "One more thing," I added as the applause died down. "We've just secured the Richardson account. This was a project we'd been pursuing for months, a multi-million-dollar contract that would cement our position as the top design firm in the Pacific Northwest. They signed this morning." More applause erupted. James looked like he'd been punched in the gut. He'd been trying to delay that contract, probably hoping to close it himself after taking over the company. After the meeting, I watched as security escorted James and Olivia out of the building. They walked with their heads down, avoiding the stares of their former colleagues. Just before reaching the door, James turned back. "You'll regret this," he called out, his voice breaking slightly. "You have no idea what you've done." I walked over to him, keeping my voice low but firm. "No, James, you have no idea what you tried to do. The difference is, I stopped you before you could destroy everything I built. Remember that the next time you think about underestimating someone." As the doors closed behind them, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The past 6 months of quietly gathering evidence, making strategic moves, and pretending not to notice their schemes had been exhausting. But it had been worth it. Later that evening, I sat in my office, my real office, the one I'd earned, looking out over the Seattle skyline. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Papers have been filed. They've both signed the non-compete agreements. It's really over. I poured myself a small glass of champagne from the bottle Lisa had brought in to celebrate. As I sipped it, I thought about everything that had led to this moment. The late nights working in my garage, the risks I'd taken, the clients I'd convinced to trust my vision. James had been there for some of it, but he'd never really understood what it meant to build something from nothing. A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. It was Lisa, holding a stack of congratulatory messages from clients who'd heard about the leadership transition. "The Richardson team sent this over too," she said, handing me an elegant envelope. They said they never doubted who was really behind Inspire's success. I opened the envelope to find a handwritten note from Catherine Richardson herself. "Madison, we choose to work with people of integrity and vision. Today proved we made the right choice. Looking forward to creating something extraordinary together." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. We restructured some departments, promoted deserving employees, and launched new initiatives that had been held back by James's interference. The energy in the office was electric. Everyone could feel that we were entering a new chapter. I heard through industry contacts that James and Olivia had split up. Apparently, their relationship couldn't survive the humiliation of their failed takeover attempt. James had moved to Portland, trying to rebuild his reputation in a new city. Olivia had disappeared from the design world entirely. 1 year later, I stood on a stage accepting the Visionary Leader Award at the Pacific Design Summit. Looking out at the audience, I saw faces of people who had doubted me, supported me, and everything in between. Success isn't just about talent or opportunity, I said during my acceptance speech. It's about resilience, about knowing your worth even when others try to diminish it. Most importantly, it's about building something so strong that no one can tear it down, not even the people you once trusted most. The applause that followed wasn't just for me, it was for every person who had ever been underestimated, overlooked, or betrayed. It was for everyone who'd fought back and won. That evening, I returned to my office and found an envelope on my desk. Inside was a magazine article about James's failed attempt to start a new design firm in Portland. The headline read, "Former executive's new venture fails to launch." I smiled, dropping the article into the recycling bin. His failure wasn't my concern anymore. I had a company to run, projects to complete, and a future to build. As I sat down at my desk, I noticed a new email from Catherine Richardson. They wanted to expand our contract, double the project scope. At the bottom of the email was a personal note. "This is what happens when talent and integrity meet opportunity. Keep soaring, Madison." I leaned back in my chair, looking at the Seattle skyline now bathed in sunset colors. James had tried to steal my company because he thought I was weak. He'd assumed that because I was trusting, because I believed in people, I would be easy to manipulate. What he failed to understand was that kindness isn't weakness and trust doesn't mean blindness. I'd built Inspire designs on relationships, vision, and hard work. And those same qualities had helped me protect it from those who tried to take it away. My phone buzzed. Another text from Sarah. "Drinks tomorrow? I hear there's a lot to celebrate." I smiled, typing back a quick yes. There was indeed a lot to celebrate, not just the success of the company, but the knowledge that I had faced one of my greatest challenges and emerged stronger. The sun had almost set now, casting long shadows across my office. But unlike the shadows of doubt and betrayal that had haunted me a year ago, these were different. They were reminders of how far I'd come and promises of how far I could still go. I gathered my things, ready to head home. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new projects, new opportunities. But this time, I faced them not as someone's wife or someone's target, but as exactly who I was meant to be, a woman who had built something extraordinary and fought to keep it that way. The lights of Seattle twinkled as I drove home, each one a tiny reminder that sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about soaring higher than your opponents ever thought possible.